Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Sorry for the lack of videos lately. I actually got sick for about a week and lost my voice completely for around 5 days or so. You might still hear a little bit of that in this video. So of course I've had all of this stuff filmed, the B-roll, the shooting, all of that for several days, but because of my voice not cooperating, obviously I haven't been able to film the actual audio portion of these videos. So over the next couple weeks, there'll probably be a few extra videos looped in there so that you end up with the same amount of videos. Now, before we get rolling into the video, I do need to shout out my 3 biggest sponsors. That is going to be Callaway Ballistics. Go ahead and use code FOCUS to save yourself some money on ammo. And of course, Optics Planet. You can save 7% by using code FOCUS. Very simple. And also my Subscribe Star members. They get access to the giveaways that I put on my channel of basically all the stuff that I review here, and also some additional content that I can't necessarily post on YouTube, so check it out if interested. Now, if you're not familiar with the Palmetto State Armory Saber lineup, it is essentially their premium tier, and it has a wide variety of uppers. Very importantly to this discussion, this specific Saber upper is the FN 16-inch barrel Cold Hammer Forge chrome line. This is the double chrome lined FN barrels made specifically for the Saber lineup. This option also has the Saber compensator and the Geisley Mark 8 knockoff rail. So I can really only specifically talk about this Saber upper, not the entire Saber lineup. Now, there's 2 major components when it comes to selecting an upper receiver. That is, of course, going to be number 1, the part selection. Did they actually select any high quality parts to go into their premium lineup? And the second part is going to be assembly. How well did they put those parts together, and do they actually perform well as a unit? Now, getting into part selection first, starting out with the muzzle device, this one comes with the Saber compensator. And it is without a doubt one of the worst muzzle devices I have ever had the misfortune of using, not necessarily from a performance perspective, but from a user experience perspective. It is a 3-prong flash hider with 2 ports on top, which in theory should work quite well for compensation and for flash reduction. However, it has the worst tuning fork noise that I have ever heard. Depending on what I was doing, sometimes it would last for 20 or 30 seconds at a time. I used it for exactly 1 range session, and then I had it sitting in my shop somewhere, and it will never be used again.
That pinging noise is horrific.
Now, that's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, as long as you're not getting an upper receiver that comes with the Saber comp pinned and welded in place, because that would be very annoying to remove. And of course, they do offer a wide variety of other muzzle devices that I would absolutely recommend over the Saber compensator. Now, getting into much better and more important components, starting out with the FN barrel. This is a FN 16-inch barrel mid-length gas system. It is a phosphate exterior with a double chrome-lined interior. As far as barrel goes, it is extremely competent in terms of its performance. It's not particularly well gassed, even though it might seem like it on camera, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. But as far as the barrel goes, it is very, very good. It is a government profile, which is a little bit outdated. It does leave a couple extra ounces on the end of the barrel. So in terms of balance, it might not quite be the best, but when we get to accuracy and long range performance, it absolutely performs fantastically. Now, the one drawback of the FN barrel is that it is not pinned or dimpled on the gas block whatsoever, and that is kind of a miss for me when it's a quote-unquote high-tiered upper, or at least a high tier for Palmetto State Armory. So the gas block is just a basic nitride gas block with a basic mid-length gas tube, and it is of course just held in place by 2 set screws, and I went ahead and dimpled the barrel for the gas block. Now, getting into the second most important component on the build, that is of course going to be the BCG. Now, this BCG is from Microbest. It is a phosphate chrome BCG Carpenter 158 bolt, all good there. Grade 8 fasteners on the gas key, stake to mill spec, 8620 carrier. It is very, very standard in terms of its materials and finish, so all good there. And Microbest is usually quite well known for its products, especially as an OEM. Unfortunately, this one here had the gas rings wear out after about 400 rounds. Now, that's bad, and certainly not what we would want on an upper receiver, especially one that's a little bit more of a premium tier, at least for the manufacturer. But every now and again, every 10,000 bolts, you're gonna have 3 gas rings that are just a little under spec or so. So they did wear out quite fast. So as of right now, without a suppressor on, it will barely cycle. The gas port size on the barrel, I pin gauged at a .077. So it is well gassed, I would say, general purpose. It'll eject full power ammo at about 230 with intact gas rings, of course. However, at this point in time, it is barely ejecting full power ammo without a suppressor on it. Fortunately, I was shooting suppressed most of the time, and with those worn out gas rings, it was actually quite pleasant, and I didn't get much gas back to the face, so of course your mileage will vary. Now, getting into the rail, this is a 15-inch Saber rail, which if you look at the profile of the M-LOK slots and their positions, looks extremely similar to the Geisley Mark 8, which is kind of a good thing. You have M-LOK on the bottom, the sides, and on the 45 positions, leaving you with the 5 most useful sections of M-LOK. Not a true 7-sided M-LOK rail, but really not needed. I've never mounted anything to those other odd positions near the bottom of the rail, but if you need them, they're not quite here. Now, the rail itself is very nice. It is, again, a 60-61 rail, very standard in that regard. Full-length Picatinny on top that is actually scalloped down the middle, which will help to save a little bit of weight. In terms of its lockup to the barrel nut and the upper receiver, on top you have rotation limiting tabs, and on the bottom you have a large locking block with 2 prongs that act as a wedge that actually directly dig into the barrel nut in a little channel on the barrel nut itself. And then of course you have 2 steel bolts that can torque it down in sort of a wedge clamp combo, which actually should work very well, and in my experience through multiple drops, it is held up very well. It is a much simpler system than what you'll find on the Geisley rails, and it is a little bit cut down, which is why it's kind of a knockoff rail, not quite a full Geisley Mark 8, but in terms of effectiveness, it is quite good. On top of that, you do have QD inserts for your slings on either side. They are not anti-rotation, so your QD swivels will kind of just move as they please. Some people do not like that. I personally don't mind, but I know some people are fairly militant about that. So the handguard overall, very, very good. Oh wait, they forgot to finish machining the inside? Yeah, they kind of forgot to finish machining the inside. There was just kind of shaved aluminum, like just sitting on the end, completely unfinished, which on its own is not really a problem because it's not going to interfere with anything on the gun. It just shows you that the QC on their components is maybe not quite all there. And again, this is their premium line, $800 upper receiver versus one of their super budget, like $250 upper receivers. You would hope the QC is a little bit better. Now, getting back to the upper receiver, it is just a standard 70-75 upper receiver. Absolutely no issues. I don't find any problems with that whatsoever. And in fact, if it's a billet upper receiver without any additional features, I would probably dislike it. Now, the last component on the build is going to be the Radian Raptor LT, which is a decent charging handle. I'm not a huge fan of the plastic overmold on the wings, but it is effective, it does work, and again, it is a little bit cheaper than the full aluminum version of the Radian Raptor. As far as using it goes, it is very, very good. It uses large ambidextrous wings with a ton of grip on them, so you're never going to slip off, and of course it is ambidextrous, which is a plus. I'm just not as big of a fan as the plastic version, but I of course know that Palmetto State Armory is trying to save a little bit of money and of course pass that on to the end user. So while I might have seemed very down on the part selection, to be very clear, the barrel itself is high quality, it's extremely durable, it's extremely accurate. I would just like to see it dimpled at a minimum for me personally. That is what I like to see on barrels and gas blocks to make sure that they don't shift. The rail is very nice. They just needed to finish up the machining work on the inside. Again, not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, just looks bad on their QC. The bolt itself, the BCG, should be very good. This specific example, however, had the gas rings burn out way too fast. They should last at least 2,000 to 3,000 rounds, not 400 rounds. Other than that, the rest of the components are fairly basic. Basic gas tube, basic gas block. The charging handle is good, if not my favorite, just because you can get other full aluminum ambidextrous charging handles for less, and you don't have to deal with the plastic wings. And the muzzle device does suck, but Saber uppers can come with a wide variety of muzzle devices, so not really that big of a deal. Again, we actually have a good part selection. There's just a few misses on 3 of the big components that I wish, well, actually could be fixed with just a little bit of extra work. Now, getting into performance, let's go ahead and talk about how it shot. Now, actually shooting the Saber on the very first range session with the gas rings intact, other than the horrible ringing on the muzzle device, it shot very well, ejecting some remanufactured ammo at about 3 o'clock with an H3 buffer, I believe. Very pleasant to shoot, very accurate, very quick, not the softest gassed upper on the market, but certainly not punchy or overgassed, especially when it was unsuppressed. And then of course, as time goes on, those gas rings blow out incredibly quickly, and it starts getting slower and slower in terms of its ejection, but you add a suppressor on there and it runs just fine. So shooting performance should be good when unsuppressed, and if the gas rings don't blow out, it's going to be a little bit overgassed when using a suppressor, so you might want to invest in a heavy buffer spring combo if you're planning on running it 100% suppressed and the gas rings don't blow out. Now, reliability was 100% because of course, as it started to slow down unsuppressed, I simply added a suppressor to the mix and it kept it running just fine. So reliability over about 12 to 1500 rounds was perfectly fine, no issues. Now, getting into accuracy, this is one of those areas where the FN, Cold Hammer Forge, Chrome Line barrels, even with the older style government profile barrel, tend to perform very well. Starting off with PMC X-Tac 62 grain ammunition, which is basically an M855 clone, we got about 2.5 MOA. Then moving on to ADI 69 grain match, which is of course a Sierra Match King bullet, we ended up at right at 1.5 MOA. Then moving on to Federal Premier, which is also a 69 grain Sierra Match King loading, we ended at 1 MOA at the first 4 rounds, and the 5th round ended up at about 1.5 MOA with just a little bit outside of the first group. And again, when it came to actually using the thing at distance, at about 600 yards on a half-sized human target, maybe a little bit bigger than that, 600 yards was absolutely no problem whatsoever. So as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely going to hover right around 1 MOA with a match load, because again, it is a 1 in 7 twist barrel, so it might have done a little bit better with a 70 to 77 grain bullet, something just a little bit heavier than the 69s I had. But even with those 69s, 600 yards was absolutely no problem whatsoever. So now let's go ahead and get into value at the end of the video. We've talked about the part selection, the performance, the accuracy, all of that sort of fun stuff. Is it actually worth the asking price? Now keep in mind that the Saber lineup does have cheaper options. However, those are usually using Palmetto State Armory's in-house nitride barrels, not the FN Cold Hammer Forge double chrome lined barrels. So those are going to be a little bit cheaper, of course. But talking about this higher end quote unquote option that they have for about 800 bucks, it is about $800 worth of parts. Now you could always build something similar for a little bit less money, but if you're not going to build it, like unfortunately most people are probably not out there putting together the highest value possible uppers. They just want something turnkey that works when they get it out of the box and is of reasonable quality. For 800 bucks, if you get a pristine example that is assembled properly with all of the parts machined properly with the BCG that gas rings don't blow out immediately, you are getting approximately $800 worth of value. So it is actually perfectly placed. The part selection is about 800 bucks. It costs about 800 bucks, and you don't have to put it together. And in theory, it should run very well. This one has been 100% reliable, but again, a little bit of issues here and there. Some of the components were definitely not my favorite, but again, they do have a wide variety of parts for you to choose from. So as far as value goes, it might seem nice when compared to like an actual Geisley or BCM, but it's really not that exciting as it performs like an $800 upper should. The components is decent enough. The assembly was fine. However, the actual quality control on the BCG and the Handguard definitely needs a little bit more. A little bit more love and care could also be put into the gas block attachment to the barrel to make sure that that is absolutely rock solid. But again, overall, while it's not particularly exciting in its value proposition, it is certainly fine. But that's about all that I have on the Palmetto State Armory Saber. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below of this specific Saber upper or any of the Saber lineup, if there's another one that I should check out or anything else that you guys would be interested in seeing. But once again, with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoy. I will see you in the next one. God bless.